On our way home for the new year, my husband, Andrew Ward, and I were in an accident. When I opened my eyes again, we had returned to the time before we started dating. In my past life, we were married for 7 years. We were respectful to each other, yet he never once agreed to have a child with me. It was only later that I realized, his heart had always belonged to his first love. After being reborn, I decided to set him free. We silently deleted each other's contacts, kept our distance, and chose different paths in life. 7 years later, he had become a top trader in the stock market. At a class reunion, he publicly announced his relationship with his first love, Sophie Anderson. Noticing that I was still single, he couldn't help but tease me. "Joanna, I know that in both lives, I've been your greatest love and the most presentable man in your life, but you don't have to wait for me." I ignored him and instead took my son's hand. Andrew Ward's face turned deathly pale. His eyes turned red with fury as he questioned me. "Didn't you say you'd love me for a lifetime? That you'd only have a child for me?" 7 years later, I met Andrew Ward again at our class reunion. I had just finished several surgeries and was too exhausted to bother dressing up. Without changing, I walked straight into the banquet hall. In the center of the crowd, Andrew Ward had his arm around Sophie Anderson's waist, enjoying the praises of our old classmates. "Andrew, you're incredible. You've only been in New York's Wall Street for a few years, and now you're one of the most promising traders. You're the pride of Needham High." "Exactly. I heard even the elite in Wall Street pay to have dinner with you. Just your consulting fees alone are worth an entire year's salary for an average person." "Andrew, I've been dabbling in stocks recently too. Could you share some insider tips with an old classmate? Help me make some money." Someone in the crowd suddenly asked curiously, "Andrew, are you and Sophie getting engaged?" Andrew Ward looked down at the woman in his arms with gentle eyes. "Yes, we're getting engaged on December 20th. A wave of congratulations followed. A former classmate then asked, "Andrew, do you still keep in touch with Joanna? You two were crazy about each other back then. I even heard your first song was written for her." At the mention of my name, Andrew Ward's smile visibly stiffened, his eyes darkening slightly. Standing beside him, Sophie Anderson flashed a graceful smile and replied with ease, "Come on, Andrew and I are getting married. Childhood crushes don't last, and neither does young love. He let go of Joanna a long time ago." Laughter spread through the crowd as they continued complimenting how perfect the two of them looked together. But I knew, Andrew Ward had written that song for me when he confessed his feelings back then. In our past life, we had fallen in love as high school sweethearts at first sight. I still remember the sincerity on his face when he told me, "Joanna, look into my eyes, I like you. Eyes don't lie." And I had believed him. But in the end, the past him had still lied. With calm indifference, I walked into the banquet hall. A sharp-eyed classmate noticed me and called out, "Joanna, you're finally here. Why are you dressed so casually? Couldn't you at least change into something formal? Don't tell me you just got off work? Where are you slaving away? We've got some successful classmates here, maybe they can introduce you to a better job." Seeing my attire, several people in the crowd sneered at me. I didn't care. I smiled, keeping my composure. From the moment I stepped into the venue, Andrew Ward's gaze had been locked onto me. I greeted him politely. "Long time no see." He froze for a moment. His expression turned unreadable before he sneered. "Joanna Brown, after all these years, you haven't changed at all. Still so unambitious." Sophie Anderson shot me a venomous look. Clinging to Andrew's arm like she was declaring ownership, she deliberately whined, "Andrew, how could you say that to an old classmate? Sure, she's had it rough, but there's no need to rub salt in the wound. Joanna has suffered enough." She looked me up and down with a mocking expression. "But seriously, Joanna, what's with that outfit? It's such a mess. You're not getting any younger. A woman should take care of herself or else she'll have trouble getting married. What man would like a sloppy woman?" Then she added with a smirk, "Do you want me to lend you some makeup?" The moment she finished speaking, laughter erupted around us. After all, Sophie Anderson was dressed head to toe in luxury brands, her makeup flawless, even down to her hair. Every movement radiated the natural grace of a wealthy heiress. Meanwhile, I had just stepped out of the operating room after nearly 24 hours without sleep. I must have looked utterly drained, like a ghost wandering in broad daylight. I was wearing the most comfortable casual sportswear, nothing fancy, just something I picked up from a small street shop. Compared to her, I was no match at all. "No need to be so polite, I don't need it for now," I replied simply and sat down at my seat to eat. After an intense round of surgeries, I hadn't eaten in nearly a day. As I quietly savored my meal, Andrew Ward suddenly walked over and placed a check for $10,000 in front of me. "This is for you, out of consideration for our past. Take care of yourself, get a decent job, buy yourself some new clothes, and learn to love yourself. Joanna, the past is in the past. don't dwell on it. If it weren't for you? Forget it, it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you shouldn't lose all motivation in life just because I left. Don't give up on yourself, okay? I looked up at him, puzzled. His unfinished words made me curious. What exactly had I done in my past life that made him so determined to abandon me after being reborn? In our previous life, we had been together from high school to marriage. He had his dream of music, and I wanted to pursue medicine. Both were careers that demanded time, energy, and money. Naturally, one of us had to sacrifice. Because I loved him, I gave up my opportunity to pursue a master's and PhD in medical school, choosing instead to enter the workforce early. With my sole income, I supported both of our dreams. He failed again and again. He was repeatedly frustrated, repeatedly discouraged. And I was like his endless power source, comforting him every time I returned home exhausted. I thought he would understand my love. But in the end, when he wanted to buy a new guitar and I refused due to financial constraints, he snapped and smashed his old one to pieces. Do you know? If I had listened to Sophie Anderson back then and gone to study in the US with her, I wouldn't have to suffer through this miserable life. I really regret being with you. After that, he stopped playing the guitar and abandoned his dream. And I, because of those words, I really regret being with you, often cried alone at midnight. But I still made one last effort, holding him gently and whispering, Andrew, I want to have a child with you. He shoved me away, his eyes filled with unspeakable disgust. With our financial situation, how can we afford to have a child? And I told you before, I hate kids. I don't want to have a child with you. Those words completely shattered my last hope. That New Year's, a massive truck came barreling toward us and ended both of our lives. In that moment, I didn't feel fear, only relief. Now that we had both been reborn and had chosen to keep our distance, there was no reason to hold on to past feelings. I quietly pushed the check back to him. No need. I don't accept things from strangers. Thank you. His brows furrowed as he questioned me, Joanna Brown, am I a stranger to you? What do you mean by this? I replied calmly, I can buy my own clothes. No matter what my job is, I think it's respectable, there's nothing shameful about it. And I don't think I've given up on myself. Keep your money and give it to someone who actually needs it. Holding the check, he pressed his lips into a tight line, standing frozen in place. Sophie Anderson walked over to his side, glancing at the check in his hand as if she had figured something out. Though her eyes flashed with anger, she still maintained a gentle facade. Joanna, if you won't take our kindness, then let's give you something even more practical. I recently opened a nail salon on City Avenue. You can come by, and I'll arrange for you to work as a nail apprentice. The pay isn't high, but you'll earn about $6,000 a month while learning a useful skill. Even if you hit rock bottom in the future, you'll still be able to open your own salon. How about it? Want to give it a try? This job should be much more respectable than whatever you're doing now. I continued eating calmly and declined their so-called kindness. Thank you for the offer, but I'm very satisfied with my current job and have no plans to change it. A classmate called out from the crowd. Joanna, why are you being so ungrateful? Andrew Ward and Sophie Anderson are being kind, giving you both money and a job opportunity. You should take it. Yeah. Look at yourself, you're already struggling like this, and you still care about pride? Coming to this reunion in such a state, isn't it just to network and seek help? Why are you pretending? Sophie Anderson pretended to be considerate. Come on, guys, don't say that. Maybe Joanna really loves her current job. She then turned to me with an exaggeratedly kind smile. Joanna, we're doing this out of goodwill, and because of our past, we're offering you a job. Don't let your pride make you miss out on a good opportunity. I truly couldn't understand why they were forcing money and jobs on me like this. I really don't need it, but thank you. Sophie Anderson maintained her gentle smile, but her eyes were filled with mockery and contempt. Andrew Ward clenched the check in his hand, his voice cold with ridicule. A useless piece of trash. I tried to help, but you're beyond saving. Fine, stay poor for the rest of your life. Right after his taunt, several male classmates swarmed around me, trying to force drinks on me. Joanna, since you're so pitiful now, drink a glass and I'll transfer you $1,000. If you're really struggling, I'll even up the amount. The men's gazes were lecherous. The classmates around them laughed without a single person stepping in to help me. I frowned, this reunion was far different from what I had imagined. If I weren't waiting for someone, I would have already left. Just as I was about to call security, Andrew Ward suddenly crushed the cigarette in his hand and grabbed the man harassing me by the arm. His gaze was ice-cold, full of restrained fury. Behave yourself. The man yelped in pain as his arm was gripped tightly. Sophie Anderson clutched Andrew Ward's sleeve. Andrew, what are you doing? His expression remained cold. Standing up for what's right. This is a class reunion, not your circus. With that, he shoved the man aside. The guy dared not retaliate but shot me a vicious glare before backing away. I couldn't help but glance at Andrew Ward, never expecting that he would actually help me. Sophie Anderson was grinding her teeth in anger but still forced a smile. I heard the young master and CEO of Blue Sea Enterprises are having a meeting upstairs. If we're lucky, we might get to see Needham's richest man. Upon hearing this, the classmates immediately grew excited. The richest man in Needham? They say he's incredibly handsome and only in his 30s, and he already has a 5-year-old son. But no one has ever seen his wife. Do you think we'll get to see her today? I have to record this for TikTok. This is first-hand news. Soon, a group of bodyguards escorted a young boy into the banquet hall. The crowd instantly erupted in excitement. With this kind of security, this must be Needham's richest man's son. He really is good-looking. The classmate who had just harassed me, despite being humiliated earlier, didn't dare complain. Instead, he turned his anger back to me. Joanna Brown, if it weren't for Sophie, a lowly worker like you would never have a chance to see Needham's young master. If I were you, I'd kneel down right now and thank her properly. Who knows, maybe you'll get a decent job out of it, or better yet, marry someone like me, who makes $6,000 a month. What a joke. I ignored him and calmly looked in the direction of the young heir. Everyone around was eagerly swarming forward, holding up their phones to take pictures and record videos of the little boy. Even the ever-so-proud Sophie Anderson had a warm, one might even say fawning, expression as she approached him. "Little one, is there anything you'd like to eat? Auntie will pay for it," she said, reaching out to pinch the young heir's cheek. But to everyone's shock, the little boy, surrounded by bodyguards, completely ignored the adults around him and instead ran straight toward me. With a bright, sweet smile, he threw himself into my arms. "Mommy, you're finally here." The little boy, who had been cold and distant just moments ago, now wore an utterly aggrieved expression. "Why didn't you come home last night? Baby missed you so much." I looked down at my son, immediately wrapping him in a comforting embrace. I gently reassured him in a soft voice. "Mommy was working, remember? I told you before I left yesterday. But tomorrow's my day off, how about I take you out to play?" My darling son, Daniel Taylor, immediately nodded enthusiastically. "Yes. Mommy is the best." The entire room fell into stunned silence. All my classmates stared at me in disbelief, their eyes wide with shock. Before anyone could speak, a tall, impeccably dressed man hurriedly descended from the meeting room upstairs. "Wife, the hotel manager told me you were here for a class reunion. Why didn't you tell me you got off work? I could have picked you up." The hotel manager, standing beside him, took a step forward and formally introduced him to the dumbfounded crowd. "This is CEO Simon Taylor, CEO of Blue Sea Group, also known as Mr. Taylor. And this," he gestured toward me, "is Madam Joanna Brown Taylor, his wife. If anyone needs anything while dining, please don't hesitate to ask. We will do our best to ensure a comfortable experience for Madam Joanna Brown Taylor's esteemed classmates." The expressions of my classmates varied, some were ecstatic, while those who had mocked me earlier turned deathly pale. A few of my female friends, who had always been close to me, couldn't help but exclaim, "Joanna, your husband is Simon Taylor, the richest man in Needham City." "Is that even a question? Didn't you hear the hotel manager? Joanna is obviously the wife of the city's wealthiest man." And the little heir called her mommy. Oh my God, this is real nobility. Faced with their astonishment, I simply responded with a polite smile. Simon Taylor, standing beside me, took one glance at my attire. His eyes softened with heartache as he gently pulled me into his embrace. "Straight from the hospital again? Finish the reunion and go home to rest," he murmured. I nodded. "Okay." Then, the cold and composed Simon Taylor ignored Sophie Anderson, who had been eagerly trying to approach him, and instead turned his sharp gaze directly to Andrew Ward. His voice carried an unmistakable disdain. "So you're my wife's ex, huh?" He smirked. "Thanks for not marrying her back then. If it weren't for you stepping aside, how would I have ever met such an amazing wife?" Andrew Ward didn't respond to Simon Taylor's mockery. Instead, he just stood there, staring at me with an expression so complicated it bordered on despair. His voice was filled with disbelief as he questioned, "Joanna Brown, is this your way of punishing me? How much did you pay these two actors?" I gently placed my son down and took Simon Taylor's hand. "This is my husband, Simon Taylor." Andrew Ward's expression shifted from denial to shock, then to a ghostly pallor, and finally, to utter silence. Perhaps, in the past, I would have cared about his emotions. But he was right. The past was already over. There was no need to dwell on it. I had a new husband. A child. A career I loved. A marriage and a family that gave me the happiness I could never have in my past life. No matter how I looked at it, this life was far better than the last. Originally, Sophie Anderson had been the one hosting this reunion. But after my identity was revealed, the atmosphere changed completely. The same people who had fawned over Sophie now shifted their attention to me, showering me with excessive friendliness. And it all happened within mere minutes. Wow, Joanna Brown really married the richest man in Needham City. Andrew Ward tried to hand her a check just now. How ridiculous is that now? Right? He thought she was struggling, but turns out she ended up with someone way better. Didn't Sophie Anderson try to set her up with a job as a nail technician? But I just heard Joanna Brown is actually the lead surgeon at Needham City's top hospital. She doesn't need anyone's help. This is laughable. Joanna, how could you not tell us about such a huge wedding? We could have given you a big red envelope to celebrate. I watched my classmates go from ignoring me to desperately trying to cozy up. It was almost laughable. But I remained polite, keeping up the necessary formalities. The reunion had long lost its charm for me. Before it officially ended, I left with my husband, Simon Taylor, and our son. Just as we stepped out of the Blue Sea Grand Hotel. Joanna Brown. Andrew Ward chased after me, calling my name. I turned to Simon Taylor and said softly, "Take Daniel to the car first and wait for me." After all, it was November, and the night air was cold. Simon Taylor didn't ask any questions. He simply nodded, just as he always had, respecting my choices, trusting me. Andrew Ward's gaze was filled with turmoil and disbelief. How did you end up marrying Simon Taylor? There was nothing to hide about this. Simon Taylor's mother had been hospitalized at my hospital due to a heart condition, and I happened to be her attending physician. Because of her illness, Simon and I frequently communicated, and that's how we got to know each other. He admired the dedication I showed to each patient, as well as my relentless pursuit of professional and academic excellence. And so, Simon Taylor, with his decisive nature, pursued me with unwavering determination. I had always noticed his deep filial piety toward his mother, and my impression of him was quite good. On the day Simon formally confessed to me, I asked him a few questions. "Do you want children?" "Yes, I do." I could say something nice like, "I'll respect your wishes, but I want to be honest with you. I want children. My dream is to have a happy family, a family of 3. Without any expression, I continued, "Would you ever stop me from pursuing medical research?" He shook his head sincerely. "Never. A person's true purpose isn't just limited to their family, it extends to society and to themselves. I will support everything you want to do. Last question, will you ever regret this?" He smiled. I, Simon Taylor, never regret anything. From that day, I agreed to give it a try. I wanted to give both him and myself a new beginning. And so, we fell in love and naturally got married. Our wedding was simple and low-key. We registered our marriage and had a small gathering with close family and friends. After I finished speaking, Andrew Ward's eyes turned red without him even realizing it. "That little boy, is he really your child? But didn't you say before that you only wanted to have a child with me? How could you have a child with another man?" His words left me momentarily speechless. I could only use his own words to remind him. "Andrew Ward, the past is in the past. Can't you stop dwelling on it? There's no need to take past life promises seriously in this life." When we silently agreed to part ways, it was the best arrangement for both of us, not just in this life, but even in the last. Besides, in our past life, you regretted being with me, and you never wanted to have a child with me. But I refused to live a life like that. Andrew Ward suddenly shouted in anger, "I regretted it because you never supported me. You emailed those music publishers, telling them not to accept my songs." Hearing this, I was completely baffled. "What are you even talking about? I have no idea what you mean. I never sent any emails. Back then, I was working 3 jobs a day to support your music dream. I didn't even have time for nonsense like that. And more than anyone, I wanted you to succeed. Didn't you ever feel that?" As soon as I said this, Andrew Ward stood frozen, as if struck by lightning. It was as though he had just been dealt a devastating blow. He instinctively covered his mouth, as if he couldn't accept the truth. His voice trembled as he continued questioning me. "Then why didn't you buy me a guitar when I asked you to?" At that moment, I finally understood what Andrew Ward had left unsaid at the reunion earlier. "Did you think we still had money? Back then, when your father fell ill, your family spent almost all of its savings on hospital bills. Other than money for food, what else did we have? Were we supposed to rob a store for a guitar?" Andrew Ward's face turned completely ashen with despair. He mumbled under his breath, "No, that's impossible. Sophie told me you sent those emails to the companies. That's why I never got anywhere with my music. You didn't want to see me succeed. You were afraid that if I made it, I'd leave you. If what happened in our past life had left me disappointed and hurt." Then at this moment, I felt nothing but complete and utter indifference. We spent years together. And just because of a few words from someone else, you completely disregarded everything I did for you? Don't you think that's ridiculous? I sighed. My husband and son are waiting for me. I'm leaving. Behind me, Andrew Ward's voice rang out, desperate and pleading. Joanna Brown, do you still love me? I shook my head without hesitation. I let go of that love long ago. I love my husband and my son now. I didn't understand why he was asking me this. After all, he had always said that there was no point in dwelling on the past. And as for me, I had truly moved on. I never expected that in just 1 month, Sophie Anderson's father, Sean Anderson, would make national headlines. Tax evasion. Using cheap, substandard materials to build housing. Forging documents. Bribing local officials. All of it was exposed. When I heard the news, I was genuinely shocked. The once arrogant, high-and-mighty socialite Sophie Anderson now looked utterly defeated and miserable in front of the cameras. Not only were all her assets seized by the court, she couldn't even return home. And her father, Sean Anderson, faced multiple charges. With the severity of his crimes, he would likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. But aside from their downfall, the real victims were the innocent families who had spent their life savings on those shoddily built apartments. All they got in return was a disaster waiting to happen. Upon hearing this, I let out a deep sigh. How disgusting. How can people do business without a conscience? Simon Taylor, who had been sitting beside me, pouted pitifully. Wife, don't lump me in with them, I have a conscience. I couldn't help but laugh. Simon Taylor had always been committed to producing the highest quality products at the most reasonable prices. All his businesses, his hotels, his real estate developments, his products, were made with the best materials and sold at fair prices. That was why his company continued to thrive and expand, and why his reputation only grew stronger. When you respect your customers, they naturally reward you with loyalty. People like Sean Anderson, who cut corners and put lives at risk just to make a profit, were nothing short of despicable. Not long after, I received a call from an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before pressing the answer button. Andrew Ward's voice came through from the other end. Did you see the news, Joanna? I was the one who reported them. I frowned, not understanding why he was telling me this. Well, then I suppose I should thank you on behalf of the public. Andrew Ward sounded weak over the phone. Joanna, can I see you? Just once? I responded firmly, I've told you before, I've already moved on. You don't need to. Before I could finish, his violent coughing interrupted me. Cough, cough. He let out a bitter laugh before continuing. I went to the hospital a few days ago. Stage 4 lung cancer. Joanna, will you see me? Hearing this felt like something in my mind snapped abruptly, a connection severed without warning. I remained silent for a long time before speaking hoarsely. Bring your medical reports and come to my hospital. Andrew Ward walked into my office. He looked significantly thinner, as if the disease had already begun consuming him. He placed the medical report on my desk. I flipped through the pages quickly, my brows furrowing. You should get admitted as soon as possible and cooperate with the treatment plan. Since I wasn't handling any cases at the moment, I accompanied him to complete the hospitalization procedures. Once everything was settled, Andrew Ward sat on the hospital bed, his eyes red-rimmed. He looked at me desperately, hesitating before speaking. Joanna, I knew it. I knew you wouldn't leave me to suffer alone. Deep down, you still have feelings for me, don't you? I know I misunderstood you before. It was all my fault. You were so good to me in our past life, and I treated you terribly. But now I understand. Joanna, I never regretted being with you. Joanna Brown, I was wrong. Can you forgive me? Can we start over? We can have a child together. You always wanted a child that was ours, didn't you? I frowned and looked at him, my voice cold. Andrew Ward, you need to understand that from the moment we were reborn, we were already over. I have a new family now. I have a husband and a child. I hope you won't say things like this again. Andrew Ward shook his head in disbelief. No. I know you still love me. Otherwise, why would you be here taking care of me? How can you just erase all those years we had together? You're just mad at me, aren't you? Please, don't be. I know I was wrong. A cold smile appeared at the corner of my lips as I pulled my hand away from his grasp. The only reason I helped with your admission is because of the years we spent together. If my actions gave you the wrong idea, I sincerely apologize. You should contact your family to take care of you instead. Also, if you really want to talk about regrets, marrying you in my past life was the greatest regret of mine. I don't love you anymore, and I don't want to have children with you. Stop living in the past. Andrew Ward sat frozen in place, his expression filled with pain and devastation. But I didn't care. I turned around and walked out of the room without looking back. Behind me, his voice rose in anger. Men are all the same. Do you really think Simon Taylor truly loves you? Why would the richest man in Needham fall for a nobody like you? Wake up, Joanna. You and Simon Taylor will never be happy together. I'm the only one who's truly right for you. Hearing his pathetic accusations, I walked away even faster. Andrew Ward hadn't changed at all. When he was doing well, he looked down on those struggling. When he was doing poorly, he envied those who had surpassed him, and tried to drag them down with him. He was someone who always regretted, but never appreciated. Everyone thought I had married above my station by being with Simon Taylor. But in my heart, our love was a partnership of equals. Andrew Ward thought I was just an ordinary doctor, never realizing that my medical research had made breakthrough contributions to the field. Simon Taylor, on the other hand, wanted to understand me more. He had once held me gently and whispered in my ear, "Wife, your research saves lives. No amount of wealth can compare to that. You're the real superhero." Because of Simon Taylor, I finally understood what real love was. Love was not about one person giving while the other took. It was about two people pursuing their dreams together, standing side by side, and supporting each other. So how could I possibly be shaken by a few bitter words from Andrew Ward? Andrew Ward, however, still refused to let go. One day, he appeared in my office holding a guitar. He started playing and singing the same song he wrote when he confessed to me. Look into my eyes, they never lie. As the familiar melody filled the room, I felt nothing. No warmth. No nostalgia. Just deep, deep irritation. How ironic. The song that once moved me now felt like a cruel joke. After all, the man who wrote it had lied to me every single day after we got married. I firmly told him to leave. Instead, he rushed forward and grabbed my hand. "Joanna, I truly regret it. I really, really regret it. I don't want to be apart from you. This is all my fault. I was the one who didn't cherish you. Please, forgive me, okay?" I looked at him coldly. Didn't I make myself clear last time? Being with you was my greatest regret. Do you know what I'm most grateful for? His eyes flickered with a hint of hope, only for my next words to completely extinguish it. That we never had a child together. That's the one and only mercy fate granted me. Please, stop bothering me. Can you do that? Just then, Andrew Ward's parents arrived. The two elderly figures hurriedly pulled him back into his hospital room, their faces full of apology as they turned to me. "We're so sorry, Joanna," his mother said, her voice filled with guilt. "Our son is ill, and he's done a lot to trouble you, but tell me honestly, is there really no chance at all between you two?" Looking at my former in-laws, who had treated me so well in my past life, I answered seriously. "Auntie, uncle, I am already married. I have a husband and a son. And even if I weren't married, I would never be with Andrew Ward again, because I don't love him anymore. I hope he focuses on his treatment and stops disturbing me." The two elders nodded with sorrowful acceptance. Soon after, Andrew Ward was transferred to another hospital. He never contacted me again. The next time I heard about Andrew Ward, it was through a phone call from his mother. "Joanna, Andrew doesn't have much time left. He wants to see you. Could you come?" I remained silent for a long time. Finally, in a hoarse voice, I replied, "Okay." After hanging up, I instinctively tried to recall memories of our past life, our moments of love, our happiest days. But I found I couldn't remember any of them clearly. So time really can erase everything. When I saw Andrew Ward again, he was a shadow of his former self. His cheekbones protruded sharply, and his once handsome face had become gaunt and unrecognizable. His eyes were dull as he stared out the window. But the moment I stepped into the room, his eyes lit up. He glanced down at his frail body and let out a self-deprecating laugh. "Joanna, I must look terrible now, don't I?" I didn't answer. He continued, "I'm sorry. I was too insecure back then. I chased my dream of music with everything I had, but all I got in return was failure. I couldn't face it, so I blamed everything on you. Maybe this is karma." Then, he slowly turned to look at me, his eyes filled with hopeful longing. "Joanna, if we could start over, if this time I treated you right, would you choose me again?" I cut off his delusion without hesitation. No. Life doesn't offer infinite second chances. I am a person who never learns to be content. No matter how many times life restarts, I will never find happiness. Andrew Ward stared at me, tears of regret streaming down his face. "So, there's really no chance?" I truly know I was wrong now. I gave him the final, definitive answer. "No. There is no chance." After leaving the hospital, I never looked back. Because what I had now was more precious than anything from the past. Not long after, my hospital received an exclusive research exchange opportunity abroad. The director personally recommended me for the position. When I landed in the US, I was met with an unexpected sight. Simon Taylor, standing at the airport with our son, waiting for me. With a bouquet in hand, he walked toward me slowly, his eyes full of warmth. I was completely surprised. Without waiting for me to react, Simon Taylor pulled me into a tight embrace. "Did I surprise you?" he whispered against my ear. "My wife is here to study, so of course, her husband and son will accompany her. Are you happy?" I nodded enthusiastically. So happy. So surprised. During my exchange program, we took time to explore the US, visiting many famous landmarks and creating beautiful new memories. During one of our trips, I received news of Andrew Ward's passing. For a brief moment, I felt a trace of melancholy. But the moment I turned around, I saw two familiar figures. One tall, one small, both running toward me with bright smiles. I opened my arms wide, embracing the future that was truly mine.